exhausted. I wonder who Stephen brought in. Good morning, Mr. Ridley. No, he's not here yet? No, I'll do without him.
Fuck off.
Almost there. The body needs to be moved. Alright. I just need some gloves and my apron. Then I can get to work. I'm going to need my... Autopsy dated November 22nd, 1991. 7:32 p.m. Led by Dr. Jack Hammond. I'll begin by verifying the identity of the Jane Doe. It's most likely Harper Lloyd, age 35, found in a well-owned house by her neighbors Leonard and Dorothy Chelsea, reported missing for a week. It is also known that the deceased was diagnosed with affective bipolar disorder. Harper was placed on drug therapy, which she dropped out of fairly regularly. During her treatment, she was under the care of her common-law partner, Richard Benson, professional truck driver. The last person who had contact with the deceased was her partner. Harper's last message read as follows: "I'm gonna take a shit in their stupid well. Then we'll see who has the last laugh." Nice one. Firefighters found the body after the Chelsea family began complaining that their tap water tasted strange, and at one point had begun to smell and turn a dark color. Police records also show that Mrs. Lloyd was in constant conflict with her neighbors. The constant parties and subsequent brawls made living in the area nearly impossible, especially when Lloyd's partner wasn't around. I proceed to open the bag and check the state of decomposition. The most important task in forensic identification of a drowned person is to distinguish whether the death occurred before or after entering the water. Okay, that could have been worse. I carefully removed the victim's clothes so as not to damage the skin. And shoes. The deceased was found fully clothed. I'm going to need the camera to document all possible suspicious marks. Definitely the first thing that stands out is the very advanced post-mortem check. The skin of the deceased appears very delicate, smooth, and relaxed from being in the water for a long time. The whole body is extremely pale. There are bruises and hemorrhages on the neck. These usually occur due to increased inhalation and fighting to breathe underwater. Post-mortem markings are seen on the underside of the body. That is, on the back, thighs, and calves of the deceased. It's likely that the deceased was lying on her back when she was fished out. The so-called washaway of the skin on the feet. The deceased had indeed been in the water for a long time. There are some obvious scratches on the skin. The skin on the hands can be easily separated from the body. The separation takes the form of a glove. So, after the preliminary exam, it's time to take a closer look at this. On today's date, the deceased was clothed. Rigor mortis does not need to be checked. Based on the state of decay, you can be sure it has subsided. Where to start? We see thick, white foam in the mouth of the deceased, resulting from pulmonary edema. Foam is a characteristic of deaths due to drowning. There are obvious scratches on the skin, especially on the back and hands. These could be defensive wounds, evidence of some sort of altercation prior to death.
Oh, so she was definitely murdered.
No obvious signs of struggle. The skin on the hands would have easily peeled away from the flesh. Some of the fingers have already lost their nails.
Fuck. Yeah, I definitely think this one was murdered.
The spots have a purplish blue-red hue, which is a typical sign of the death of the organism.
Also, her belly's a bit swollen, so she might actually be pregnant.
Yep, pretty typical. Liver mortis are formed as a result of putrefaction of blood in the veins. Due to the fact that the deceased was wearing shoes at the time, her feet are in better condition than her hands. Nevertheless, we can still notice a clear, wavy skin and the so-called washerwoman's skin texture.
Gross.
Okay, that's probably enough to indicate that. I'd better note that down in the records. Hands heavily wrinkled considering the deceased's penchant for drinking milk. There doesn't seem to be anything in those abrasions. Marks found on the neck and foaming at the mouth are typical signs of drowning people. Diffuse spots are caused by blood rotting in the veins. Liver mortis of a different color can indicate poisoning. In this case, maybe their district. Fortunately, simple trip, loss of balance, and as a result, you end up in a deep hole with no way out. That's all for now. Before I begin the dissection, I'll make sure the suggested identity is correct. The suitcase with the fingerprint equipment should be around here somewhere. If the body of the deceased is well preserved, fingerprinting is similar to that of a living. With decomposing bodies, the tissue of the pads on the fingers tends to shrink. The fingerprint sheet should always be checked. Slipping fingers, too much or too little ink, or inaccurate hand position can make fingerprints illegible. I'm going to conduct a dactyloscopic examination. If in fact the deceased is at the police database, I will find her. Glycerin is injected successively between the nail and the skin of each finger. The substance then enters the fingertip, removing shrinkage and wrinkles.
I always wanted to remove my fingerprints.
Brush. Only when the skin is taut and elastic can you use ink. I think it's enough. I'm getting fingerprint samples. In the case of drowning victims, you have to be extremely careful. The skin may fall off the hand like a glove when you take the print. I'll use the fax machine to add the print into the system. I wasn't sure what the World Wide Web. I wasn't sure it would amount to anything, but the World Wide Web has been a blessing for speeding up my work.
Boop.
Once the data uploads, I'll run the prints against the police database on the computer. Great. The data is there. Click upload. Now, go through the database and find a matching print. Expect possible hours of fun. Analyze button. And we have a result. Everyone has a story to tell, even if it's just a police record. So, as predicted, the deceased turned out to be Harper Lloyd. That went smoothly. I'll print this out and attach it to the medical records. Great. Now we can go back to my inspection. I'm adding the name of the deceased. I'll start the internal examination by taking fluid from the victim's brain. A needle inserted through the nose will do the trick.
Huh.
If the victim was alive when she fell into the well, she must have swallowed water fighting for her life, and then diatoms, characteristics of cooled water like a well, got into the body. In the meantime, I'll check the sample under the microscope. I'm sure that these algae... Now I need to adjust the knobs properly, and place the diatom in the center of the slide. It's not a dirty... man. Perfect. The aperture... Oh, I'm finally starting to see something here. I'm finally starting to see something here. I won't even notice an army of diatoms from this... Great. This way I'll see if I'm dealing with a large concentration of these algae. It's not a dirty lens, I'm afraid. Perfect. notice an army of diatoms from this distance. I won't even notice an army of diatoms from this. Great. This way I'll see if I'm dealing with a large concentration of these algae. As expected, we find the aforementioned algae in the solution. Their upper part, Epitheca, which overlaps the lower, Hypotheca, is clearly visible. The presence of diatoms in the brain samples taken indicate that the deceased was certainly alive when she fell into the water and was possibly conscious. Since there were diatoms in the brain, it means that many more of them must have entered the body. Studies of the rest of the organs will most likely confirm this hypothesis. I can finally get to the practical part. I must be extra careful because the skin of the deceased is very stretched. An explosion here. It's easy to see that the ribs have been imprinted in the lungs, so I'm going to start by drawing blood from the lungs for testing for diatoms. If diatoms were only present in the lungs, this would mean that the victim was placed in the well after death, and the perpetrator wanted to get rid of the corpse in this way. I removed the lungs and was taking the lungs in my hand. I feel that the tissues have lost their elasticity, which is the result of water emphysema. In addition, there is significant swelling of the organs, and as a result, we have a nice imprint of the ribs. The emphysema itself, it's clear how far it's progressed, which is characteristic of drowning. Corpses found in water are worth examining with the tomograph. However, I can't count on such luxuries, so I must reach for a more archaic technology. A bucket and water.
Oh my god.
Still nothing. Historically, the lung float test is used to detect infanticide. The water should be at room temperature. That's enough. To test for this, I have to place the lungs in a container of water. This checks if there is air in the lungs. And speaking of lungs, everything is ready to bring them here.
No.
Jesus.
What the fuck?
Of course, such a study isn't without flaws. Air may have entered a newborn's airways during resuscitation attempts. Gas is released during decomposition. In this case, however, it's about something else. Namely, the amount of fluid in the lungs. To test for this, I have to place the lungs in a container of water and wait to see if they fall or if they will float on the surface. Just as I assumed, the lungs collapsed easily. Fluid could have entered the lungs during panic attempts to catch breath underwater, but it could also be the result of bacterial infections or cancer, so further investigation is needed. I move on to dissecting the lungs of the deceased. You can hear the distinct, very unpleasant crackling of the tissues being cut through. The parenchyma is remarkably pale, although small hemorrhagic foci and petechia are present on the surface. Alright. Now, I will check the collected fluid under a microscope. If we find 20 diatoms on the slide, it can be considered drowning, and our result is not false positive due to it's not a demand. Perfect. It's not man. Perfect. The aperture still needs adjustment. The image, no. Too much light. I know. I'm finally starting to see something here. I won't even notice an army of diatoms from this distance. Great. This way I'll see if I'm dealing with a large concentration of these algae. As expected. In solution, the diatoms are clearly visible. There are smaller and larger clusters of them. There will definitely be more than 20 of them. I'll make a note of all this. So far, this case looks pretty standard. It's clear from the beginning that it's drowning. Well, the procedure requires me to check everything anyway. So, I move on to checking the other organs. I ligate the heart, and then remove it for inspection. Strongly developed putrefactic hemolysis, the organ can be seen at first glance. Apart from that, no signs of a heart attack or other heart disease. I move on to the next organ. This time, it's the liver. It's immediately apparent that the deceased didn't care for herself. Like most organs, her liver is enlarged and severely congested. The beginnings of cirrhosis are visible in some. transfer the organ to a board and proceed to dissect. The cross-section clearly shows dilated veins and many small hemorrhagic foci. I must admit that this is quite a feat, considering the rather young age of the deceased. Harper enjoyed drinking so much that she might not have lasted a few more years. I move on to the stomach. I take a sample of the fluid for testing. It looks very turbid. I'll see what happens after spinning, but that's in a moment. Now, I carefully ligate the organ, then cut it off. It's enlarged, probably full of putrid gases. I transfer it to the board and carefully open it, checking the contents. One thing you'd never get used to is how much this task smells. Okay, the stomach is full of fluid and unidentified organic matter, which is probably leftover food. So let's check the diatoms. Again, but in a centrifuge for a change. The problem with examining drowned people is being able to show whether the death was due to drowning or whether something else contributed to the death. Cramp, heart attack, drugs, homicide, or some accident. Such an analysis requires viewing from different angles and a careful interpretation of the collected data, including those from the field. That's why it's so important to collect as many samples as possible. Unfortunately.